The church was full of white lilies and wet eyes when my husband took the microphone and turned my mother's funeral into a stage for betrayal. "Family," Marcus said, voice smooth as the satin on my mother's casket. "As we honor Mama Adeola, we must also be honest." He looked across the pews, past cousins who had flown in from Lagos and aunties from Houston who wore jewel the color of the morning sky. He looked at me. "I can't pretend anymore." Whispers rolled down the aisle like a wind no one could see. My hands, still in black gloves, tightened around the prayer program with Mama's smiling portrait on it. The choir hummed softly. Pastor Reed stood beside Marcus, frowning. "I have carried this marriage alone," Marcus went on, tapping the base of the microphone with 2 fingers like a drummer keeping time. "Bills, decisions, even this funeral. I paid for what Naomi could not." People turned fully now. I watched his jaw tighten, watched him let a breath sit on his tongue like he wanted to taste it. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a crisp white envelope. He held it high, like an offering. "After today," he said, "I'm listing Mama Adeola's house. We need liquidity, we need freedom. I've spoken to an agent from Buckhead." He gestured toward the back. Heads swiveled. That was when she stepped into the center aisle, black dress clinging to her like a secret. Vanessa, the consultant who had been helping Marcus with a business plan. My stomach turned. I felt the pew tilt beneath me, though I knew the wood was steady. Auntie Yvette, seated at my left, squeezed my wrist. "Keep your head, child," she said softly. "Keep your head." Marcus smiled with just his teeth. "This is Vanessa," he said into the mic. "She will be handling the sale and other transitions. After years of fighting alone, I deserve some peace." The murmurs became a sound that rattled the stained glass windows. My mother's best friend, Sister Joan, covered her mouth. Pastor Reed reached for the mic, but Marcus pulled it away and cleared his throat again, as if he hadn't already burned the air. "And Naomi," he said, pointing at me with the envelope, "you're a good person, but the world is real. You come from nothing. We can't keep pretending. The house has to go. The assets have to be liquid." I stood up slowly. Auntie Yvette's nails bit my glove. I stepped into the center aisle, every eye sliding after me like beads on a string. "You will not sell my mother's house," I said. I didn't raise my voice, the words carried anyway. Marcus laughed into the microphone, a sound that didn't belong in a church. "You don't have a say, Naomi." He waved the envelope. "Power of attorney, signed when Mama was in the hospital. She wanted me to handle the details, remember?" His eyes flicked toward Vanessa, who tilted her head, almost bored. Something black and cold slid through my chest. Marcus hadn't visited the hospital without me. Not even once. Except, there had been that morning I stepped out to meet the caterer. 2 hours. 2 hours he had been finalizing the memorial program. He tapped the envelope again, then tucked it beneath the silver clip holding his tie straight. "When the pastor finishes, I'll address the family in the fellowship hall. For now, let us grieve." He handed the microphone back to Pastor Reed, with a show of humility, then stepped down, Vanessa falling in beside him, her perfume working its way across the aisle. He brushed past me without a look, but the paper he'd tucked into his tie slid, caught, and slipped free. It flapped once, like a bird stunned mid-flight, and fell. I bent, caught it before it hit the floor. The church waited. Every hinge and every neck clicked. I did not open the envelope there under the painted gaze of the saints. I simply held it, felt the weight, the rough of the paper under my glove. Then I raised my face to the stained glass, the one of Esther looking past the palace gate, and breathed. "Let's continue," I said to Pastor Reed, and sat. The choir began to sing again, but the sound was different now, as if the notes themselves had decided to keep secrets. I kept my eyes forward until my mother's casket was wheeled down the aisle for the final prayer at the graveside. People touched my shoulder as they passed. Some whispered, "Strength," and "We're with you." I nodded, because that's what you do when your world is shaking and you choose not to show it. Outside, the Georgia heat leaned on every neck. The old oaks behind the church threw wide patches of shade, and the red clay looked like new wounds beneath the grass. We stood with the family as the casket descended. I told myself to hear the prayer. I told myself to watch the sky reflected on the polished wood and remember only my mother. But when the last Amen settled on the air like dust, Marcus tapped his watch twice and touched my elbow. "We need to talk," he said softly, and peeled me away from the circle of aunties and cousins before they could claim me. He steered me toward the fellowship hall as if I were a guest at my own life. The hall smelled of jollof and chicken stew, of chin-chin and plantains fried to a sweet edge. Colored balloons bobbed in a corner someone had thought would cheer children. The sound of women shifting trays onto tables clattered like a different kind of rain. Marcus took me to the side room, where the church kept extra chairs. He closed the door. He didn't look at me. "I didn't want to do this here," he said, checking his phone. "But we have to be clear." "Clear?" I asked. "Like the way you brought your mistress to my mother's funeral?" He used a smile that had convinced me once upon a time to forgive missed birthdays and cancelled plans. "Words like mistress are dramatic, Naomi. Vanessa is helping me, helping us. And your mother's house is listed by Monday. We have a time-sensitive buyer. I need you to hand me that envelope." I held his eyes. "This envelope?" He nodded. "Yes, please." There are moments when you find a stillness inside yourself you didn't know you owned. A quiet room with thick walls. I went there. I opened the envelope. It wasn't a power of attorney. It was a copy of one, poorly done. The notary stamp was skewed. The date sat on the wrong line. The signature, my mother's steady, palm-bold letters, looked as if someone had taught their hand her name, but not the way she pressed down with her pen on every A, a forgery. Clean enough to fool a busy clerk, dirty enough to itch the eye of anyone who'd watched Mama sign school forms and church rosters since Girl Scouts. Marcus saw my face change and moved to snatch the paper, but Auntie Yvette stepped through the door before he could reach me. Behind her, the church secretary, an older man with grey eyebrows that meant business, tucked his hands behind his back. "Problem?" Auntie asked lightly. "No problem," Marcus said, too quick, too smooth. "Good," Auntie replied. She eased in, closed the door with her foot, and nodded to the secretary. "Mr. Hightower, you know our family well. Could you take a look at this document Marcus says the church staff witnessed last week?" Hightower adjusted his glasses and took the paper from me. He studied it, hummed, nodded, hummed again. "We didn't notarize this," he said at last. "And Sister Adiola never signed papers in the side room. She refused to sign anything important unless her daughter was present. Said it on principle." "Silence thick as syrup." Marcus laughed, but it came out tight. "There must be a mix-up. Let's clear it up Monday," Auntie said. "With our attorney. We don't need—" "We do," she said, and her eyes didn't blink. I slipped the paper back into the envelope and closed it. "Thank you, Mr. Hightower," I said. "Please join us in the hall." When the older man left, Marcus let the smile drop. The line at his mouth sharpened. "You're making this difficult, Naomi." "You made this dirty," I said. "Dirty?" He stepped closer. "You've been playing small your whole life, and I'm tired. I'm tired of carrying us while you sit on dreams that never pay. You won't even take a promotion. You won't—" "Stop," I said. I was not going to fight with him beside a stack of folding chairs while plates clinked on the other side of the wall and children laughed at something that had nothing to do with grief. "We will bury my mother," I said. "We will feed our family. Then we will speak with lawyers, that is all." He studied me. He didn't know where my stillness came from. He had never found the door. "Fine," he said, and opened the door as if he owned the building. "But Monday morning, Naomi, Monday." He strode away, and Vanessa, waiting near the coolers, pretending to check her phone, fell into step with him. They moved like people who had decided on a road and dared the world to block it. Auntie Yvette watched them go, then turned to me. "You good, child?" I nodded. "Yes." She tilted her head. "You will be." We returned to the hall. Women pressed plates into my hands and thanked me for letting them serve. I smiled when I had to. I hugged who I needed to. I moved through the sweetness and the salt, the soft cries and the forced laughter. I was a daughter burying her mother. I was also a wife who had just been measured and found by the man who promised to love me not enough. That's how the shock ended. Here is how the story began. I grew up in West End Atlanta in a tan duplex that baked in July and held every sound in winter like a drum. Mama ran a small shop on Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard where she sold everything a person could need on a Tuesday afternoon. Ankara head wraps, hair grease that smelled like blue flowers, little bags of plantain chips that crackled in your teeth. She taught women to tie jeel for weddings and little girls to sit still while beads were braided into their hair. On Sundays, she sang in the alto section, steady and warm like a hand on your back. She came to America with one suitcase and two certainties. God was watching and work wasn't optional. My father, he was a story we didn't tell. He left before my memory formed a decent picture of him, and Mama never wasted words on the kind of man who teaches you by his running shoes. It was us. That was enough. I met Marcus in a college business class when I was 19 and he was 21. He loved to talk, but he talked about me, asked big questions, listened the way some boys pretend to and some boys truly do. He called me gold, and I didn't know yet how many metals can shine before they turn your neck green. We graduated. He became a sales manager for a car dealership up in Sandy Springs. I took a job at a logistics startup near the airport, the kind of place where people drank cold brew and talked about disruption, while the drivers who made everything possible slept in their cabs. I was good at the work, better than I looked on paper. I listened to drivers like I listened to Mama's customers. Patterns talk if you let them. The company put me on Africa routes, then Nigeria first flights. Because someone had noticed my emails got answers, my shipments cleared when others stalled. I learned the grind of customs, the speed at which a banana becomes useless if a single scanner blinks red. I learned who to call in Lagos, who to text in Rotterdam, who to feed stew when they came through Atlanta so that later a favor might taste familiar. And I learned something else, that wealth hides itself in quiet rooms. I built relationships. I invested tiny at first, small equity in a cocoa cooperative's cold storage initiative, then a sliver in a freight forwarding company in Savannah, then a loan to an auntie's cousin in Baltimore who imported shea butter by the crate and had outgrown her garage. I didn't boast. I didn't even buy a car with heated seats. I told Marcus enough to be true, but not enough to be trapped by his idea of winning. He used to laugh at how I packed leftovers from restaurants. "You're so African," he'd tease, and I'd smile because I am, and because in my mother's house rice left behind was a sin. When we married, Marcus insisted on a big wedding at a botanical garden, fairy lights and a live band, and a photo booth with props. I wanted small, he wanted grand. "You deserve it," he said, and there was no argument against that. But after, bills came like locusts. Marcus liked surfaces, new shoes, popping bottle service on birthdays, a watch that cost more than Auntie's Toyota. "Perception is reality," he said. "You have to show people you are someone." I didn't argue with the philosophy. I just believed the audience was smaller than he imagined. The ones I wanted to see me were the farmers I partnered with near Ibadan, the women who built a warehouse in Tema with their own hands, the bank managers who answered a Lagos call at 2 a.m. because they had learned my name meant contracts signed and shipping paid. I built a holding company when I was 26. I called it River Cola Holdings because Mama said rivers made cities and cola nuts made friends. The company owned pieces of many things: land near the Lekki Free Zone, storage in Jacksonville, software that predicted container delays, a brokerage that connected African small producers to American skincare brands that paid on time and told the truth about ingredients. I didn't lead with my face. I learned to file paperwork like a shadow. By 32, the spreadsheets, if I wanted to count on a Sunday afternoon, said I was wealthy. By 34, the numbers were obscene. The thing about an empire, even a quiet one, is this: it doesn't stop the world from testing your heart. Mama got sick the spring I turned 35, a cough that didn't leave, a tiredness she called age, until the scans lit up like rain on a roof. We did what families do, prayed, cooked, watched the shows she liked and laughed too loudly at the parts that were funny on purpose because letting laughter out soothed the ache inside. Marcus, at first, was kind. He drove Mama to early appointments, sat in the parking lot listening to podcasts, sent texts with heart emojis I didn't ask for but appreciated. He told people at the dealership he needed flexible hours and, for a while, he used them for us. Then something shifted. The kindness thinned. He missed a Tuesday, then a Thursday. He had training, late clients, inventory headaches you wouldn't understand. His phone face down. A second phone I asked about and he called. Company issued. The way he pulled away in the morning as if the house were a net he had learned to see. The night before Mama passed, Atlanta was wrapped in a wet heat that made curtains stick to windows. I slept on the recliner beside her bed, every creak a bell in my chest. Marcus kissed my cheek on his way out, said he was going to the gym to clear his head. He returned after midnight smelling like a cologne I hadn't bought him and a citrus shampoo that didn't live in our shower. Mama slipped away just after sunrise, her hand in mine, her breath a small bird folding its wings. I told her she could rest. I told her I would be fine, even though the word fine was a poor blanket for the hole that opened in me like a well. In those first days, arrangements stack themselves like books you don't remember reading. We met with Pastor Reed. We called family, we chose lilies, we wrote the program. Marcus offered to handle the boring papers, and I let him gather them at the dining table while I stood at the sink and washed dishes I couldn't taste. I watched him from the doorway, the way he shuffled documents, the way he smoothed his tie with 2 fingers, always the same 2, as if he were patting a child. I should have questioned more. I should have, but grief fogs the glass between you and your life. Sometimes you see the shapes and think they are something else. And now here we were, Sunday afternoon, my mother in the ground, my husband trying to turn her house into cash, his consultant waiting to list what did not belong to him. He thought I was poor. He thought he carried me. He thought the woman he'd married, who packed leftovers, who wore simple dresses, who told him no when he wanted to lease a car that cost the first car my mother ever owned twice over, had nothing but a soft heart and a small bank account. He did not know River Cola. He did not know the contracts that would outlast earthquakes. He did not know the numbers stacked behind doors that opened to my voice. After we fed the family and the sun dropped low enough to make the parking lot glow bronze, I slipped into the pastor's office and closed the door. The room smelled like old Bibles and lemon polish. I took the envelope from my purse and laid it on the desk beside a stack of hymnals. I had other papers in the purse, ones only Auntie and 2 men in Lagos had ever seen. I took those out too. I arranged everything carefully. I dialed a number I knew by heart but used only when there was no other road. "Madam Naomi," said the voice on the other end, rich and calm. "This is Kofi." "Hello," I said. "I need to activate the full protective protocol, immediate holdings lockdown, communication silent mode, and I need to add 1 restriction." "Name it." "My husband," I said. "Marcus Reed. Freeze anything he touches through me. If he comes with papers, if he calls, if he breathes near a custodian of my assets, shut it down." There was a pause, the sound of professional surprise wrapped in respect. "Done," Kofi said. "And I am sorry for Mama Adeola." "Thank you," I said, and hung up. I lifted the lid of the old wooden box on the pastor's bookshelf, the one he used to keep extra pens and, for some reason, a tiny jar of shea butter. I placed the envelope with the fake power of attorney inside and set my mother's favorite bookmark on top, the one that read, "Truth doesn't rush, it arrives." I closed the lid. Then I removed a small flat case from my purse. Inside were 2 cards, black metal heavy as a promise. One opened the Lagos vault that held the original contracts and deeds. The second authorized executive movements across every River Cola account worldwide. When I had signed for them years ago, Kofi had said, "We print 2, 1 to use, 1 to bury." I had laughed and asked, "Where?" He had replied, "In a life you never have to apologize for." I had tucked them away and prayed I would never need the second. I slipped both cards back into the case, then slid the case into the thin pocket sewn into the lining of my dress, a trick Mama taught me when I was a child, walking through markets with naira notes that needed to go unseen. There was a soft knock. I opened the door. Vanessa stood there, one hand on her hip, her grief dress flawless, her mouth curved like she was practicing a smile that could pass for sympathy. "Quick note," she said as if we were colleagues. "Monday at 9 we're meeting the buyers. It'll be quick. Bring your ID." I looked at her, really looked, the way you look at a person you might one day have to remember for a statement. "Monday," I repeated. "Great," she said. "And, for what it's worth, Marcus is just trying to take care of things. You know how you can be. Soft." She turned to go. "Vanessa," I said. She paused, elegant. "When you stand in a house someone built in love," I said quietly, "you should remove your shoes." She blinked, confused, then smirked. "See you Monday," she said, and left. I closed the door. I stood in the lemon scent and the hush. I lifted my phone again and opened the secure app that lived in a folder people ignore. The screen split into 4 squares. In each, a ledger with columns of numbers. I pressed my thumb where the app asked me to. One square glowed. The balance swam to the center of the screen. 950,000, 32. The 32 always made me smile. No round numbers in the real world. Money moves in cents first, then runs so fast the dollars look like a blur. I thought of Mama's hands, brown and steady, counting out change in the shop. I thought of her telling me when I was 11 and wanted new sneakers I did not need. Never let loud things teach you what quiet things are worth. Outside, I could hear the scrape of chairs, the clatter of serving spoons, the music of cousins laughing to drown the day. I put my phone away. I straightened my dress. I opened the door. On my way back into the hall, I passed Marcus. He was checking his reflection in the dark window, smoothing his tie with those same 2 fingers. He looked at me in the glass, not turning his head. "Don't make this ugly tomorrow," he said, casual. I stopped. I stood beside him, watching his reflection watch mine. For a heartbeat, I remembered the boy who had carried my books in the rain and made me tea at 2 a.m. during finals week. Then I remembered the man on a church stage, voice easy and cruel. "I won't make it ugly," I said. He smiled, triumphant because he didn't know the language I was speaking. "Good," he said. I stepped closer, our shoulders almost touching, 2 shadows in a window that held the last light of day. "But I will make it unforgettable," I whispered. Then I walked past him out into the hall, into the sound of my family and the smell of stew that had fed us since I could remember. While behind me, Marcus watched my back and counted money he thought he could touch. Monday was coming, so was the cost of what he had done. Monday rose up slow and heavy, the kind of Georgia morning that felt like a damp cloth pressed to your face. I woke before the alarm, the house too quiet for a place that still remembered my mother's humming. The pale light inside the blinds made our bedroom look like a waiting room. Marcus slept on his side, one arm thrown over the edge as if he might scoop something from the floor, even in his dreams. His second phone lay face down on the nightstand, the case scuffed at the corner. I dressed in a black sheath dress with a grey blazer, simple flats, hair braided back from my face. I did not want to look rich. I wanted to look like the kind of woman who knows where every paper lives. In the mirror, I could see the small line that had appeared beside my mouth over the last week. It looked like a place grief had set down a heavy bag and promised to return for it later. I brewed coffee and set a mug on the counter for Marcus. I scrambled eggs. I fried plantains the way Mama liked, with a little salt so the sweet came through. I placed a plate on the table because habit is a river that keeps running even when the bridge above it falls. Marcus walked in at 7:10, tie already straight, cologne already loud. He kissed my cheek. I felt the air of it, but not the warmth. "We should leave by 8:30, he said, sliding into the chair. "The buyers want to do a quick walkthrough before we talk numbers." "Numbers?" I asked. He forked eggs. "It's cash, Naomi. You don't understand how rare this is. We'll be free." I placed the last of the plantains on a plate. "Whose cash?" He smiled as if I'd told a joke, then tapped his phone. "An investment group out of Miami working with Vanessa." I drank my coffee. I didn't say what my face wanted to say. I also didn't say that by 7:02 a.m., 2 separate filings had already moved through the Fulton County Clerk's office. Alice pendens freezing any transfer of Mama's house until the court resolved a contest over authority and an emergency petition for injunctive relief citing suspected fraud. The documents had my name and Auntie Yvette's new lawyer's name on them. Her name was Claire Lawson. She worked out of a modest office near Castleberry Hill, no marble lobby, no gold letters on the door, just a brass plaque that said Lawson Plus Fellows and a reputation for carving truth out of tough wood. At 7:25, my phone vibrated on the counter, a message from Claire. "Filed. Hearing set for 2 p.m. today by Judge Mendel. Will serve at the house. Hold steady." I slid my phone into my blazer. Marcus poured himself orange juice and didn't ask. At 8:15, I texted Auntie, "Leaving soon." She replied with a simple, "I'm near," which in Auntie language meant, "I've already solved 3 problems you don't know about." At 8:30, we were in the car. Marcus drove. The radio played a morning show with hosts who laughed too loud. He kept one hand on the wheel and one on his phone, glancing down when it buzzed. Vanessa texted, then called, speaking in a bright business voice that turned sharp when she thought no one was listening. "We're good," Marcus told her. "She's with me." I watched the city slide past. Brick shops with ironwork balconies, murals of faces that watched you back, churches on corners with hand-painted signs promising revival at 3. Somewhere a kid was running late for school. Somewhere a woman was counting change for a bus fare. The world kept moving, the way it always does, indifferent to whether your heart is breaking or your pockets are full. We pulled into Mama's driveway at 8:57. The little house looked like it always had on Mondays, hydrangeas leaning into the walk, the porch swept, the screen door a little crooked from years of kids running in and out. I could still see her through the front window if I tried, straightening throw pillows and humming "Great is Thy Faithfulness" under her breath. 2 black SUVs idled at the curb. Vanessa stood on the porch steps, tablet in hand, lips the color of cherries. Beside her, a couple in their 50s wore matching polite smiles and linen clothes that cost more than they looked like they did. Behind them, a tall man in a tight shirt and a looser conscience leaned against the railing, chewing gum and scanning the street with eyes that didn't blink enough. "Right on time," Vanessa sang as we got out. She came down 2 steps to kiss the air beside Marcus's cheek. "Naomi," she added, the way some people say the name of a receptionist they're deciding whether to be kind to. "These are the buyers, Mr. and Mrs. Laramie." "Laramie," the man said, shaking my hand a beat too long. "Pleasure. We're thrilled to help take this property off your hands. Great bones. Excellent location. Quick close. It's a favor to all." His wife nodded as if agreeing with the weather. I looked past them at the man on the railing. "And you?" He smiled with his mouth, but not his eyes. "Security," Vanessa said quickly. "We've had issues at open houses." "This isn't an open house," I said. "Still," she replied. "Best practices." We stepped inside. My mother's house always smelled faintly of shea butter and lemon oil. The buyers walked through, speaking in a language real estate people made to show they were not attached to anything that could not be replaced. "We'll knock down this wall," Mrs. Laramie said. "Open the space." Mr. Laramie tapped the hallway. "We'll widen here. Good flow." Vanessa nodded, as if she had planned the house itself and was pleased to discover her own brilliance again. Marcus watched me out of the corner of his eye, waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. I traced my finger along the edge of the dining table Mama had saved 3 months to buy. I pressed my palm flat against the cool of the kitchen counter, where we had rolled puff-puff dough on rainy Saturdays. I walked them room to room, as if I were a realtor too, only my valuation wasn't measured in price per square foot. In the back bedroom, the one Mama used to call the reading room, though it was mostly where we kept the good blankets, Mr. Laramie opened a closet and said, "We'll turn this into a wet bar. Buyers love a surprise." "We aren't selling," I said. All 4 heads turned. Vanessa's smile didn't drop, but it tightened. Naomi, she said. We discussed. No, I replied quietly. We didn't. Marcus stepped close, lowering his voice. Not now, he whispered through his teeth. Don't embarrass yourself. Before I could answer, the tall man from the porch leaned his head into the room. You've got company, he said, gum clicking. 2 suits and a woman with fire in her eyes. Finally, Vanessa muttered. We walked back to the living room. Claire Lawson stood in the doorway. Tailored navy suit, short natural hair, eyes that took in the space and filed what mattered. Auntie Yvette stood at her shoulder, arms folded, Jill the colour of calm oceans. Behind them, a uniformed deputy held a manila folder against his chest, like a book he had already read. Good morning, Claire said. Ms. Naomi Reed? Yes, I replied. Mr. Marcus Reed, she asked, eyes shifting. That's me, Marcus said, straightening. Claire nodded to the deputy. You may serve. The deputy stepped forward, handed Marcus a set of papers, then handed Vanessa her own set. You've been served, he said, in a voice that had said it 1,000 times. Temporary restraining order regarding property actions. Hearing at 2 p.m. Vanessa flipped through the pages, face going from polite to paper-cut sharp. This is a joke, she said. You can't restrain a consensual sale. It isn't consensual, Claire replied, her tone mild, and you can't sell something you don't have authority over. Marcus rattled the papers. I have power of attorney. Claire reached into her leather folder and pulled out a printout. You have a forgery. We've filed the notary's affidavit. We also have a signed statement from the church secretary and 3 witnesses who were with Ms. Naomi's mother during the hours your document claims she was meeting you in a side room. She glanced up. Lunch at Sister Jones, catfish stew, 2 o'clock soap opera. She never left the couch. The tall man at the railing stepped inside again. You're causing delays, he said to Claire, as if he'd been paid to dislike delays more than lies. Sir, the deputy said evenly, you can wait outside. I watched Marcus's Adam's apple jump. He kept flipping pages like he might find a clause that turned his wrong into right. Additionally, Claire continued, a lis pendens has been recorded. Any attempted transfer or encumbrance is frozen pending the court's determination. She spoke calmly, like a teacher reminding restless students there would be a test after recess. If anyone attempts to file a deed or a lien today, that filing will be flagged, investigated, and likely voided. I don't recommend trying. Mr. Laramie tugged at his linen collar. This is unexpected. Vanessa. Vanessa used her cherry mouth to form a lemon. All obstacles have solutions, she said quickly. We regroup. We request an emergency hearing to lift. Already set for 2, Claire replied. You can request what you like. We'll bring the forgery. You can bring your best shoes. The deputy coughed into his fist to hide a smile. Vanessa did not. Marcus exhaled through his nose like a bull deciding which fence to test. I have to make a call, he said, stepping toward the door. Before you do, Auntie said, her voice honey with a touch of pepper. Check page 4, the part about transferring marital funds without disclosure. He stopped, thumb at the corner of the paper. His mouth thinned. He kept walking out onto the porch, phone already at his ear. The buyers gathered their politeness and folded it into their bags. We'll consider our position, Mr. Laramie said, which meant we came to get a bargain, not a headache. They left in a whisper of linen. The tall man lingered. He studied Claire, then me, then the deputy. He put his gum in a tissue, stuck it in his pocket like he meant to keep it, and ambled out. We stood in the living room with the quiet. Claire looked at me. We'll win the order, she said. But this is step 1. Next, we file the criminal complaint on the forgery. Are you ready for that? I thought of Marcus on a church stage, of Vanessa's red mouth at my mother's funeral. I thought of Mama's bookmark in the pastor's box. Truth doesn't rush. It arrives. Yes, I said. Auntie squeezed my shoulder. Good. Claire packed her folder. I'll meet you at the courthouse at 1:45. We'll keep it simple and clean. She nodded at Auntie. Miss Yvette. They left. The deputy tipped his hat and followed. The house exhaled. I moved to the kitchen, The small clock above the stove ticked like a heartbeat. I opened the window. The day smelled like cut grass and faraway diesel. At the sink, I washed 2 cups that didn't need washing. Marcus burst back through the front door 15 minutes later. His face had changed. The smoothness was gone, replaced by a set jaw and eyes that flicked like cameras, finding the focus too late. "What did you do?" he asked. "About what?" I replied. "My card is frozen," he said, voice rising. "My accounts. I can't transfer. HR called. They said someone contacted them about activity and compliance and—" He stopped himself, as if he'd stepped too close to a hole and seen the drop. I dried my hands on a towel and hung it straight. "You were moving money from the joint account without telling me," I said. "You also opened lines of credit in both our names with mail going to a P.O. box instead of our home." He laughed without humor. "You think you can make this hard for me? I will make you sorry." "Marcus," I said softly, "you already did." He stared at me, and for a moment I saw confusion underneath the anger, like a boy who has lost a game he invented. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "We can fix this," he said, changing tactics. "We can go in together to the judge and say it's all a misunderstanding. We can list the house in your name, and then we'll split the proceeds. 50-50, fair." Fair would have been not forging my mother's name. He swallowed. "I did what I had to do." "No," I said. "You did what you thought you could get away with." He looked past me, out the window, as if the alley behind the kitchen might offer a better answer. "Vanessa says—" "I don't care what Vanessa says," I replied. "But tell her to wear lower heels to court. The floors in 8B snag everything that pretends to glide." The front door opened again. This time the sound was heavier, like a decision stepping over a threshold. A large man in a tan suit and a gold chain walked in without permission, 2 younger men behind him. He held a leather folder that had lived a hard life. Marcus stiffened. "Darius," he said, voice suddenly small. "You can't just—" "Funny," the man said, smiling without warmth. "That's what people say when their paper is due." He turned to me and stuck out a hand. His knuckles were scarred. His watch could pay a semester of college. "Ms. Naomi, I'm Darius Cole. I'm here as a courtesy. Your husband took a bridge loan from my firm last week. Secured," he said, "by deed of trust on this property." He set the folder on the coffee table and opened it to a copy of a document that made my eyes hum. "Due today, close of business." Vanessa appeared behind him, breathless, tablet clutched. "He's a friend," she said too quickly. "A partner. Temporary." I looked at the document. The notary stamp matched the one on the fake power of attorney. The signatures tried to look like ours and failed in the same music. The loan amount was ridiculous for a house this size, interest the kind only desperation accepts. "Mr. Cole," I said, keeping my voice even, "this property is under a lease pendens. No transfer, no lien, no encumbrance can attach until the court rules. Any document filed against it today will flag as potentially fraudulent. If you were advised otherwise, you were misled." He clicked his tongue, amused. "I don't file where a man can see me coming," he said. "I don't like flags, but I do like money back when I give it." "Then you'll have to ask Marcus," I replied, "because I didn't sign this, and the court will say so. And if you try to collect from my family's home, you'll find yourself answering to a judge who doesn't enjoy mornings like this." He studied me as if I were a puzzle. "You're calm," he said. "I am," I answered. "That makes me nervous." He pivoted to Marcus. "Where's my money?" Marcus's mouth opened and closed. For a person who loved words, he suddenly had none. He pulled at his tie, smoothed it with those same 2 fingers. "We just hit a snag," he said. "Vanessa's lining up another buyer. We'll make you whole, plus bonus." Darius looked at Vanessa. She smiled like a child in a principal's office, insisting that the dog really had eaten the homework. He gazed back at Marcus. "I prefer today," he said simply. "You'll be paid," Vanessa said. "I have a wire pending." "My accounts are frozen," Marcus blurted, forgetting himself. Darius turned his head slowly. "Oh?" I could feel the room breathe in and hold. If you've ever been outside before a storm splits a sky, you know that sense. Cotton in your ears, a waiting that tightens the skin of the world. Frozen by who? Darius asked, almost friendly. Compliance stuff, Marcus said quickly. Temporary. Darius nodded as if someone had just described a recipe he didn't intend to try. He closed his folder. Here's how we'll play it, he said, voice pleasant. 2 p.m. You go to court to tell the judge a story. 4 p.m. You bring me my money. 6 p.m. I assume you've made your choices. Everyone likes choices, right? He smiled at me again, then at Vanessa, then at Marcus. It wasn't a threat. It was a schedule. He and his men left, the air behind them cooler, as if they'd taken some heat with them. Marcus sagged into Mama's armchair like it had promised to hold him. He put his face in his hands. I watched his shoulders move up and down, like a tide in a sea that had lost the moon. Naomi, he said after a moment, voice muffled. Help me. Please. I wanted to remember the boy who had been kind. I wanted to. But the man who brought a girlfriend to my mother's funeral sat here asking for rescue from a boat he had set on fire. Here's what's going to happen, I said, keeping my voice soft so it didn't cut more than it had to. We go to court. We tell the truth. You return whatever you can to whoever you owe. You call your lender and your boss, and you say the words they require. Then we separate our accounts and our lives. I will not build a life where my mother's name is a tool on your keyring. He looked up, eyes wet. You're leaving me? You left me, I replied. You just made it official yesterday. Vanessa's tablet chimed. She glanced down, went pale. What? Marcus asked. She swallowed. The Miami buyer pulled out, she whispered. They said a higher authority warned them to pause any deal touching your name. They won't say who. I didn't smile. Kofi didn't need applause. Marcus pressed his palms to his eyes. I have nothing, he said, voice breaking. They'll take my job. Darius will... He stopped, as if speaking the rest would make it step into the room. You are not the first person to discover consequences, I said. He stared at me then, really stared, as if something about me had become a language he had not known I spoke. For a second, fear flickered behind his anger. Not fear of Darius, fear of me. The doorbell rang. We all froze. The clock over the stove stretched 1 second into 2. The bell rang again, firmer. Vanessa looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at me. I walked to the door and opened it. On the porch stood Pastor Reed with a small wooden box in his hands, the same box from his office with the extra pens and the tiny jar of shea butter. His eyes were calm, his shoulders were set. Behind him stood 2 deacons and Sister Joan, whose mouth was a line carved by love and years. Naomi, Pastor said gently, may we come in? I stepped aside. He entered, set the box on the coffee table next to Darius's empty coffee ring. He glanced at Marcus and Vanessa, then back at me. There is something you need to see, he said, fingers resting on the lid. Your mother asked me to keep it for you. She told me to deliver it only when the time proved itself. My mouth went dry. What is it? He lifted the lid. Inside lay a folded document wrapped in plastic, a small velvet pouch, and Mama's bookmark. He handed me the bookmark first. I turned it over. On the back, in her round hand, she had written, "For truth when you must use it like a key." Pastor nodded toward the wrapped paper. "Open it," he said. I peeled back the plastic. The document's title stared up at me, clear black letters on thick white paper. River Cola Family Trust, Deed of Gift and Transfer, Adeola A. Bamidele, to Naomi A. Reed, with life estate reserved. My breath hitched. Claire had not seen this. I hadn't told anyone this trust existed because I had set it up quietly for Mama months ago, but she was supposed to keep the originals. Why was this copy here? I read the next line and understood. The trust included a clause I had added at Mama's insistence. Upon settler's death, residential property at 201 Ashby Street shall become the permanent site of the Adeola Community Learning House, managed by trustees appointed by River Cola Foundation. Marcus leaned forward, eyes wild. "What is that?" he demanded. "The reason this house will never belong to you," I said, voice trembling with something too big to name. "And the reason your buyer list just got very, very short." Pastor reached into the velvet pouch and drew out a small, heavy key, black metal, simple, old. He placed it in my palm. "Your mother asked me to give you this also," he said. "She said even empires need doors, and some doors need the right hand to open them." The room felt smaller, fuller. The house seemed to stand taller around us, as if it had heard its future and approved. Vanessa's tablet chimed again. She glanced down, then back toward the door, face blanking like a screen that had been unplugged. "Where are you going?" Marcus snapped. She looked at him with a kind of sudden, clean pity. "Away," she said. "I don't do causes, Marcus, I do closings." She reached the threshold and stopped. For what it's worth, I thought she was weak. She nodded at me. I was wrong. She left. Marcus looked at me, at the trust papers, at the key. He looked at Pastor. He looked at the door where Vanessa had been. He stood, hands twitching, as if they wanted to do something. Fix, break, catch, throw, but had forgotten which. "You planned this," he whispered, accusation and awe wrestling in his throat. "No," I said, and I meant it. "I prepared." He laughed, a small, broken thing. He ran his hand over his face. 2 o'clock, he said, as if saying the time could slow its arrival. 2 o'clock, I agreed. We stood there, the clock ticking, the house listening, the key warm in my palm, when Marcus's second phone buzzed loud on the coffee table. He flinched and glanced down. The caller ID said, "Kofi, Lagos." Marcus stared, then looked up at me, confusion slicing through the anger. "Who is calling me from Lagos?" he asked, voice thin. I didn't answer. The phone buzzed again. The room held its breath. He swiped to answer, put it to his ear. "Hello?" He listened. Whatever he heard turned his face the color of ash. He swallowed hard, eyes flicking to me, then to Pastor, then to the door. "What?" he whispered into the phone. No, how?" He lowered the phone slowly, as if it had become heavy. He met my eyes, something like fear, and something like respect, and something like loss, all trying to fit into a face that didn't have room. "They know," he said softly, "who you are, what you have." The key in my hand felt heavier. The house seemed to tilt, just a fraction, as if it were bracing. "Who knows?" Auntie asked from behind me. Marcus opened his mouth and spoke a name I hadn't heard in 10 years, a name tied to a man who had once taught me exactly how dangerous quiet wealth can sound when it finally speaks. And as the name left his tongue, the doorbell rang a third time, longer, louder, followed by the unmistakable knock of someone who already had one foot inside. The knock rattled the doorframe like it belonged to someone who never asked permission. All of us, me, Marcus, Auntie Yvette, Pastor Reed, turned at once. My hand tightened on Mama's key without thinking. Marcus froze, lips parted, like he had been caught mid-confession. Pastor moved first. He stepped forward and opened the door. On the porch stood 3 men. The one in front wore a dark grey agbada despite the Georgia heat, a cap perched neatly on his head. His face was carved with lines of experience, his beard salt and pepper. His eyes, sharp, steady, fell on me instantly, as though he had flown all this way just to measure the weight of my soul. "Naomi Adeola Reed," he said, his voice deep, rolling like distant thunder. "Daughter of Adeola Bamidele." He tilted his head toward Pastor, then to Auntie. "Forgive the intrusion. My name is Chief Oba Alade, and your husband has spoken my name where he should not have." Marcus shot to his feet. "I didn't," he started. Chief Oba lifted one hand, silencing him. "You called me, Marcus. You begged for help when you realized your debts outweigh your hands. And in your begging, you revealed something I already suspected, that your wife is no ordinary woman living quietly in Atlanta, that she commands a fortune hidden in the bones of River Cola." The room shifted. The air itself seemed to sit down heavily between us. "You know about River Cola?" I asked. My voice quieter than I meant it to be. His eyes softened. Child, half of Lagos whispers about the mysterious woman who moves cocoa, shea and steel across oceans with the precision of a drummer keeping time. But no one ever puts a face to the name, until now. Marcus swallowed hard. I only told him because I needed leverage. You told him because you are a fool, Auntie Yvette snapped, her voice sharp as glass. Bringing hyenas to the door of the house your wife built. Pastor Reed remained calm, though his hands were clasped so tightly, his knuckles whitened. Chief, he said carefully, this is a house of mourning. Speak your peace, but remember you stand where a good woman's spirit still lingers. Chief Oba inclined his head respectfully. Then he looked back at me. I did not come to harm you, Naomi. Quite the opposite. I came to warn you. The moment Marcus opened his mouth, word spread. And word travels faster than ships. There are men, dangerous men, who now believe River Cola is vulnerable, that the woman behind it is distracted by grief and betrayal. My fingers pressed into the metal key in my palm until it dug into my skin. What men? I asked. He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if the walls themselves might listen. Men who do not knock before they enter. Men who see $950 million not as a business empire but as blood in the water. If you do not act wisely, Naomi, they will come for you, your daughter. He stopped himself, realizing what he had said. I froze. My daughter? His eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to me. You never told him. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Marcus's face contorted with confusion, then anger. What daughter? He barked. We don't have children. Chief Oba studied me. Slowly, painfully, I nodded. We don't, I said, my voice breaking. Not together. Marcus's world tilted. I could see it in his eyes, the puzzle he had thought complete now sprouting new jagged pieces he hadn't known existed. Chief Oba cleared his throat. That secret is yours to tell, Naomi. I will not speak it, but I advise you this. By sundown, you must decide. Hide, fight, or negotiate. There will be no fourth option. He turned, signaling to his men. I have said what I came to say. I will return tonight for your answer. He paused at the doorway, looking directly at Marcus. And you, do not call me again. A man who betrays his wife at her mother's grave cannot be trusted with even a single truth. Then he was gone, his men moving like shadows behind him. The sound of their car engines rumbled down the street until only silence remained. Marcus spun toward me, his face twisted. What is he talking about? What daughter? What secret are you keeping from me? I gripped Mama's key tighter, my heart pounding so loud it felt like the walls could hear it. My eyes burned with a truth I had buried for too long. And before I could stop myself, the words slipped out. She isn't yours, Marcus. She never was. The room cracked open with gasps. Auntie Yvette's hand flew to her chest. Pastor whispered a prayer under his breath. Marcus staggered back like I'd struck him. And somewhere deep in the silence, I heard Mama's voice in my memory. Truth doesn't rush. It arrives. It had arrived. And it wasn't finished yet. Marcus's knees buckled. He gripped the arm of Mama's chair like a man clinging to the edge of a cliff. His eyes darted from my face to Auntie's, then to Pastor Reed, as though he was searching for someone to say he had misheard. What did you just say? His voice cracked, raw and trembling. Naomi, what do you mean she isn't mine? We don't even have a... The truth pushed itself out of me, unstoppable now that it had broken free. We do have a daughter, Marcus, but not the way you think. She's 10 years old, and she has been living in Lagos with Mama's cousin since she was a baby. I didn't tell you because... I swallowed hard, my hands shaking as I gripped the key Mama had left me. Because I never trusted you with her life. The room froze. Auntie Yvette covered her mouth, tears gathering in her eyes. Pastor Reed lowered his head, murmuring, Lord, give us strength. Marcus staggered backward. His face was a storm of disbelief, rage, and something deeper, wounded pride. You hid a child from me, a daughter, for 10 years. Do you know what you've done to me? To us. To us. My voice trembled, but it was firm. Marcus, you betrayed me before you ever knew she existed. You showed me long ago that wealth and appearances mattered more to you than loyalty. Mama told me never to tie my child's future to a man who couldn't even protect her mother's heart. He shook his head violently. No, you can't do this. You don't get to stand here, after making me look like a fool in front of Chief Oba, after dragging me into court, and now tell me that you've been lying this whole marriage. I deserve that girl. She's mine by marriage. By right. Auntie Yvette stepped forward, fire in her eyes. By right? You forfeited every right when you brought your mistress to this house of mourning. You are not fit to guide a child, Marcus. Not Naomi's, not anyone's. Marcus's chest heaved as his anger boiled. So what now, Naomi? You keep her hidden forever? You think those men Oba warned about won't use her against you once they find out she exists? You think you can shield her with secrets and papers? My throat tightened, but I held his gaze. That's why Mama set up the trust. That's why she left me this key. She knew this day would come, the day my enemies would learn what I built. She wanted me to be ready, and I am. At that moment, Pastor Reed placed a steady hand on my shoulder. His voice was calm but heavy with warning. Child, secrets always come with a price. You've told the truth to us, but soon the world may know. You must decide how to move forward, quietly or with thunder. The clock on Mama's wall ticked toward noon. Time was marching us closer to the 2 p.m. court hearing, closer to the battle that would either seal Marcus's schemes shut or tear them open wider. Marcus ran both hands over his face, muttering under his breath. Then he looked at me, eyes wild with desperation. If you don't let me stand with you in court, Naomi, if you don't let me back into this empire, those men will destroy me. I'll have nowhere left to run. Do you want that on your conscience? I stepped forward, lifting the key between us. Marcus, every choice you made brought you here. You betrayed me at my mother's funeral. You tried to steal her house. You lied, schemed, and mocked me because you thought I was poor. My voice broke, but I steadied it. You will not use my child as your shield. Not today. Not ever. Silence swallowed the room. Then the doorbell rang again, sharp, urgent, relentless. 3 times. Everyone froze. Auntie whispered, "Who else could it be?" I walked slowly to the door, heart pounding, key still clutched in my palm. I pulled it open. Standing there was a tall woman in a dark blue suit, her eyes cold and calculating. Behind her were 2 men in black, carrying slim briefcases. She held up a badge I recognized instantly, an International Financial Crimes Task Force. "Naomi Adeola Reed?" she asked. "Yes," I whispered. "You need to come with us. Your empire has drawn dangerous attention, and we have questions that can't wait." Behind me, Marcus gasped, Auntie clutched her chest, and Pastor whispered another prayer. The woman's gaze sharpened. "And if you want to protect your daughter, you'll answer them truthfully." The room spun, the weight of truth and danger pressing down like a storm, and just like that, the battle for my 950-meter empire and my daughter's future had officially begun. Viewers, if you were in Naomi's shoes, would you have revealed the truth about your hidden daughter to Marcus at that moment, or kept it secret longer? What would you have done in her situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Like this story if it grips you, and share it with friends who love suspenseful tales like this one. The living room shrank into silence, every eye on the woman with the badge. The air seemed heavier, charged, as though the house itself braced for what was coming. Her voice was clipped, precise. "Mrs. Reed, we are conducting an active investigation. There are whispers of international fraud, shell accounts, and assets tied to River Cola Holdings. You may think you are invisible, but $950 million is a flame that draws moths. Some of those moths are dangerous governments. Some are predators in suits. The two men behind her stepped forward. One opened a case and laid a slim folder on Mama's dining table, careful not to disturb the lace cloth still spread there from the funeral gathering. Marcus moved fast, snatching up the folder, flipping it open. His eyes widened. This says federal seizure. Naomi, they're coming for everything." The woman ignored him, her gaze fixed on me. "You are not under arrest, not yet. But if you want to safeguard your assets, and your daughter, you will cooperate fully. Names, accounts, transfers, every shadow River Cola has hidden in." My throat went dry. "And if I don't?" She leaned in, so close I could smell the faint steel of her perfume. "Then others will come, Naomi, men who won't bother with paperwork. They'll use force, and the first thing they'll use against you is your child." The room tilted. Pastor Reed crossed himself. Auntie Yvette's hand found mine, squeezing until my fingers ached. Marcus paced like a trapped animal, muttering, "This is all falling apart. I told you, Naomi, we needed to move fast. You should have listened to me." The woman straightened, snapping the folder shut. "You have until the court hearing at 2 o'clock. Appear with counsel, with transparency, and perhaps we can shield you from the storm already gathering." She looked at Marcus with contempt. "But your husband's involvement complicates everything. His name appears on suspicious transfers. His connection to known loan sharks like Darius Cole only deepens the mire." Marcus's face went pale. No, I can explain. Vanessa handled that. Claire rose. "Objection. That document is a forgery. We have sworn affidavits from the church secretary, multiple witnesses, and a notary confirming this signature is fraudulent. We also submit handwriting analysis." She handed over a folder, crisp and organized. The judge examined the pages, his brow darkening. "Mr. Reed, this signature, it looks like a child tracing letters." Murmurs rippled across the courtroom. Marcus flushed. His lawyer stammered, It may be irregular, Your Honor, but the intent—" "The law is not about intent," the judge snapped. "It is about evidence." He turned to Claire. "What else do you bring?" Claire glanced at me, then opened her briefcase. From inside she drew the sealed document Pastor Reed had delivered that morning, the River Cola Family Trust. She held it aloft. "Your Honor, this is the deed of gift and transfer, executed months before Ms. Bamidel's passing. Properly notarized, properly filed, witnessed, and irrefutable. It names my client, Naomi Adeola Reed, as the rightful trustee of the estate. Furthermore, it dedicates the disputed property as a community learning house in perpetuity. Meaning," she paused for effect, "it cannot be sold by anyone. Ever." The room gasped. Reporters scribbled furiously. Auntie Yvette smiled through tears. Marcus shot to his feet. "This is madness. She hid that document. She's deceiving everyone. And what about the money, huh? What about River Cola?" He turned wildly toward the gallery, desperate for sympathy. "You think she's just a grieving widow? She's sitting on nearly $1 billion. $1 billion. And she's been lying to all of you, even to me, her husband." The judge's gavel cracked down. "Order!" All eyes swiveled to me. My chest tightened. This was the moment Mama had warned me of, the moment the quiet river would roar in public. Slowly I rose. "Yes," I said clearly, my voice steady though my knees trembled. "It's true. I built River Cola. I built it in silence, in the shadows, while my husband mocked me for packing leftovers and living modestly. I never flaunted my wealth because I wanted to build something that would last beyond me. My mother knew, my God knew, and that was enough." I took the key from my pocket, holding it high. This key unlocks more than doors. It unlocks schools, farms, warehouses, and futures for thousands who depend on River Cola. That is my legacy. Not the lies of a husband who betrayed me at my mother's funeral. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge leaned back, eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Reed, what you're admitting could have significant legal implications. Do you understand that?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "But I'd rather speak the truth here than let my enemies speak it for me outside." The judge studied me for a long, heavy moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Very well. This court finds the power of attorney presented by Marcus Reed invalid and fraudulent. The property in question is hereby secured under the Adeola Community Learning House Trust. Effective immediately, Marcus Reed is barred from any involvement in this estate." Gasps and applause broke out, silenced only when the gavel slammed again. Marcus's face twisted in rage. "You can't do this. You can't cut me out like—" "Silence!" the judge barked. "One more outburst and you'll be held in contempt." Marcus collapsed into his chair, seething. Vanessa slid slightly away from him, as though his fire was finally too hot to stand near. But just as relief washed over me, the courtroom doors swung open with a loud bang. 2 men in dark suits entered, flashing international badges, the same task force woman had warned me about. "Your Honor," one of them called out, his accent clipped and foreign, "we need this proceeding paused immediately. This matter extends beyond property. It now involves transnational financial crimes. River Cola's empire is under global review." The judge slammed his gavel. "Who authorized this interruption?" The taller man's eyes locked on me. "We were authorized by a higher court, and by the governments who've been watching River Cola for years." He pointed directly at me. "Naomi Reed must come with us now." The courtroom exploded in chaos. Shouts, gasps, reporters leaping to their feet. Auntie Yvette cried out my name. Pastor Reed tried to push through the crowd. Claire rose, objecting furiously. And Marcus leaned back in his chair, a slow, twisted smile spreading across his face. Because he knew, just as I did, that the battle had only just begun. The corridors outside the courtroom echoed with chaos, heels clicking, reporters shouting, officers barking orders. The task force men moved like shadows with guns, surrounding me as if I were both crown and criminal. Claire Lawson shouted after them, "You cannot seize my client without due process." But their badges gleamed with a power that did not wait for permission. One of them, the taller agent with steel-grey eyes, leaned close as they pulled me into an unmarked black van. "Naomi Reed, you've been living in silence too long. The world has questions, and now you will answer them." The door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed me. The van jolted forward. Inside, the air was heavy with cigarette smoke and secrets. The agent across from me dropped a thin file onto the seat between us. It slid toward me as the van turned a corner. On the front was stamped, "River Cola, Classified Investigation." I forced my voice to remain steady. "What do you want from me?" The man's eyes didn't blink. "Names, partners, every account you control. You've built an empire that moves cocoa, shea, steel and oil across borders without a single politician's blessing. Governments don't like that. Corporations don't like that. And Marcus Reed," he let a cruel smile curl across his lips, "he's already talking." My stomach dropped. "What?" He opened the file. There it was. Marcus's name signed across a statement. Lines highlighted. Words circled. Claims that he was the architect of River Cola. That I had only married into wealth and was laundering his fortune through shadow networks overseas. My blood turned cold. The second agent, a stocky man with a scar on his cheek, leaned in. "Your husband betrayed you at your mother's funeral, Naomi. Now he's betraying you in front of the world. Unless you cooperate, he wins. Your empire becomes his narrative, and your daughter becomes bait in a game you can't control." The mention of my daughter made my chest tighten. "Leave her out of this," I snapped. The tall agent tilted his head. "That depends. Help us dismantle River Cola, and perhaps we can protect her. Stay silent, and we can't promise what enemies will find her first." I clenched Mama's key in my palm so tightly it dug into my skin. For the first time, fear tried to smother me. But beneath it, a fire burned. They thought Marcus's lies could erase me. They thought fear of losing my child could silence me. They didn't know the depth of the river I carried inside. I straightened my back. My voice was calm but sharp. "You want names? Accounts? Fine, but you'll get them on one condition." The scarred agent raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "That you give me 5 minutes alone in front of the judge, before the world. Let me speak, not Marcus. Let me put the truth on record. After that, you'll have what you need." The tall agent studied me for a long moment, the van bouncing over a pothole. Then he gave a thin smile. Bold, risky, dangerous. I like dangerous. He tapped the file. But understand this, Naomi. Once you open that door, there is no shutting it again. The world will know who you are. Your empire will never be quiet again. I met his gaze. So be it. The van screeched to a halt. Outside, I could hear the buzz of cameras, the roar of a crowd, the gavel pounding inside the courthouse as pandemonium spread. The agent leaned close, his voice a whisper like a knife sliding free of its sheath. Then prepare yourself, Mrs. Reed, because when you walk back in there, you won't just be fighting for a house. You'll be fighting for the soul of your empire. The door yanked open. Light flooded in. Reporters screamed my name. Officers pushed the crowd back. And as I stepped out of the van, flanked by men who wanted my empire in pieces, I saw him, Marcus, standing on the courthouse steps, smiling smugly into microphones, telling the world he was the true mastermind behind River-Cola. The fire inside me roared. It was time to burn his lies to ash. The courthouse steps boiled with noise, cameras flashing like lightning, microphones thrust forward, reporters shouting Marcus's name. He stood tall in his suit, tie straight, sweat glistening at his temple, but hidden behind a smug grin. And as I've said, Marcus declared into the crowd, River-Cola was my vision, my hard work. My wife, Naomi, she was simply the face I allowed to operate. I carried the risks, the debts, the late nights. Without me, there is no empire. And without me, there is nothing left for her to stand on. The crowd murmured, hungry for the scandal. The agents at my side tried to steer me through the chaos, but something rose inside me, something too powerful to stay silent. I stopped. I turned, and with Mama's key in my fist, I stepped forward, up onto the courthouse steps. The reporters gasped, cameras swiveling, microphones pivoting away from Marcus to me. The air buzzed with anticipation. Enough, I said, my voice cutting through the roar like a blade. The entire crowd hushed. Even Marcus froze, his grin faltering. Enough lies, enough betrayal, enough pretending. My voice grew stronger, steadier with every word. Yes, I am Naomi Adeola Reed, and yes, I am the woman behind River-Cola. I built it in silence while Marcus mocked me for living humbly. I built it when he spent money on shoes and bottles while I invested in warehouses and schools. I built it when he turned his back on family, when he betrayed me at my own mother's funeral. And let me tell you all something. I lifted Mama's key high so it glinted in the sunlight. This empire is not his. It was never his. It belongs to every farmer in Lagos, every trader in Tema, every dock worker in Savannah. It belongs to my mother's memory and to the daughter he never even knew existed. The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, the thunder of flashing cameras. Marcus's face twisted in shock and fury. "Daughter," he shouted, his voice cracking, you hid a child from me." But his words were drowned by the sea of voices, and then, like the heavens had timed it, a new voice rose above the crowd, deep and commanding. "Every word she speaks is truth." The crowd parted as Chief Oba Alade emerged, his agbada flowing, his men at his side. He moved with the gravity of a man who had seen empires rise and fall and had chosen where to stand. He climbed 2 steps and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I am Chief Oba Alade," he announced. "I have dealt with River-Cola for years. Contracts, partnerships, trust, always with one person. The woman you see standing here today, not her husband, not this man who sells his honor as quickly as his word." The murmurs turned into a roar of support. Reporters screamed for confirmation, shoving microphones closer. Cameras zoomed in. Marcus lunged forward, face red, spit flying as he pointed at me. "She's lying. She's stealing from me, from us. I'm her husband. I own half of everything." Chief Oba's voice thundered back. "A man may own a ring, but that does not make him king. You betrayed her, Marcus Reed, at her mother's grave, in her hour of mourning, and the whole world now sees you for what you are." The crowd exploded, some booing Marcus, others cheering me. The air alive with the electricity of truth finally spoken aloud. And in that chaos, one of the agents leaned close to my ear, whispering coldly, You may have won the crowd, Naomi, but don't forget, the world of money isn't decided by applause. By nightfall, governments will demand your empire's ledgers, and when they open those doors, you'd better pray no skeletons fall out. I straightened, my jaw firm, my voice steady as I turned back to the microphones. Then let them open the doors, because River Cola was built clean. It was built with sweat, with faith, and with vision. And today I will not just defend it, I will expand it. The crowd roared louder than ever, my mother's name chanted, my daughter's future whispered like prophecy. But even as I stood tall, I caught a glimpse of Marcus at the edge of the steps, slipping into the shadows, phone pressed to his ear, his expression dark and calculating. He wasn't finished, and deep down I knew his next move would be far more dangerous than lies. Viewers, imagine standing on those courthouse steps. Would you have revealed the truth about your hidden empire to the world, or stayed silent to protect your secrets? What would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories like this one, and like and share if Naomi's courage struck a chord with you. The courthouse crowd was still buzzing, chanting Mama's name, reporters chasing sound bites, when I noticed Marcus slip into the shadows. His phone pressed tight to his ear, his voice low but urgent. I knew that tone. It was the tone of a desperate man bargaining with wolves. I couldn't hear his words over the chaos, but I could read the stiffness in his jaw, the way his free hand trembled as he gestured sharply. He was making promises he couldn't keep, and I had a strong suspicion about who was on the other end of that call. Darius Cole, the man who didn't like delays, the man who had given Marcus until sundown. I turned back toward the crowd, raised my hand, and let the reporters drink in the last of my words. But inside, my mind was already racing. If Marcus was calling Darius, he wasn't begging for mercy. He was bargaining, offering something bigger than repayment. Maybe access to River Cola, maybe information about my daughter, maybe my life itself. The thought made my blood run cold. Claire Lawson touched my arm, pulling me back toward the courthouse doors. Naomi, enough grandstanding. We need strategy. The federal agents are already circling. They'll want closed-door talks this afternoon. Chief Ober nodded. The crowd is yours, but the law belongs to those who sit in quiet chambers. And your husband, he spat the word, is stirring snakes in the dark. I glanced back one last time. Marcus's figure was half hidden near the side of the courthouse, his head bent as he spoke into the phone, his face twisted with determination. When his eyes met mine from across the chaos, something cold passed between us. He ended the call abruptly and disappeared into the city streets. Inside the courthouse, the mood shifted. The cheering crowd was left outside. Now there was only the chill of air conditioning and the echo of boots on tile. Two of the International Task Force agents guided me into a side corridor. Claire followed, demanding, "Any questioning happens with counsel present." The tall agent with grey eyes gave her a tight smile. "Of course. But understand, we're not here to play courtroom games. The stakes are international." They led us to a secure conference room. No windows, just a long oak table, pitchers of water, and a projector humming in the corner. A panel of officials sat waiting, men and women in suits, eyes sharp, files stacked in front of them like weapons. The woman in blue, the one who had first come to my mother's house, sat at the head of the table. "Mrs. Reed," she began, her tone cool. "We have 3 questions. 1. How did you build River Cola without international oversight? 2. Where are your full ledgers? And 3, most urgent, who else knows the access codes you hold?" The room was silent, but for the hum of the projector. I placed Mama's key gently on the table, its black metal catching the sterile light. "I built River Cola with integrity, not corruption. My ledgers are protected, not hidden. And as for the codes, only one other person knows them." The officials leaned forward. "Who?" My chest tightened. My mind flashed to Lagos, to a little girl with bright eyes and braids tied with blue ribbons. My daughter. "She's only 10, I whispered. The room gasped. Papers rustled. The woman in blue narrowed her eyes. "Mrs. Reed, if your daughter holds any knowledge of these accounts, She is already in danger. Your enemies will come for her first, including the man you married." My heart pounded. She was right. Marcus had betrayed me at Mama's funeral, in court, and now on that phone call. What would stop him from betraying me through my child? Before I could answer, the door banged open. A security officer rushed in, breathless. "Ma'am, we have a situation." The projector flickered on automatically, connected to a live news feed. On the screen, Marcus stood at a podium in some downtown hotel ballroom, Darius Cole at his side. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted. Marcus raised his hands for silence. "I am Marcus Reed," he declared, his voice carrying with false authority. "And as of today, River-Cola is under my stewardship. My wife has been removed for fraud. We will be restructuring the company immediately, with new international partners." Beside him, Darius smiled like a man who had just signed a death warrant. The feed cut out. The room erupted in alarm. The woman in blue slammed her folder shut. "He's moving fast. If the world believes he controls River-Cola, your empire will collapse before sunrise." I stared at the blank screen, Mama's key heavy in my palm. My empire, my daughter, my future. All being stolen, in real time, by the man who had once sworn to love me. And for the first time since this storm began, I felt something new, not fear, not grief, but war rising in my bones. "Then we move faster," I said. "If Marcus wants a war for River-Cola, he's going to learn what happens when a river floods and drowns everything in its path." The ballroom lights glared hot against Marcus's forehead as he stood beside Darius Cole. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, the air thick with the smell of sweat and ambition. "This is a historic day," Marcus declared into the microphone, his voice trying to carry the weight of a man he wasn't. "River-Cola will no longer hide in shadows. Under my stewardship, it will become a global force, transparent and profitable. Together with my partner, Mr. Darius Cole, we will usher in a new era of wealth and opportunity." Darius's smile widened, but his eyes never softened. He wasn't there for Marcus's speech. He was there for leverage, for the keys to the empire he had tasted but not yet owned. Reporters clamored for answers. "Mr. Reed, what about your wife? What about Naomi Reed?" Marcus forced a smirk. "My wife has stepped aside. She was overwhelmed. I am the true architect of River-Cola, and I alone can lead it forward." The cameras popped again. The lie was spreading like wildfire. But across town, I was no longer sitting quietly in a conference room. The task force, Claire Lawson, Chief Ober, and Auntie Yvette, surrounded me as we huddled in front of a wall of screens. The feed from Marcus's press conference blared live, his voice dripping arrogance. My daughter's face flashed in my mind, her future dangling by the threads of his lies. Claire slammed her hand on the table. "If this lie goes unchallenged, investors will panic. Contracts will collapse. River-Cola will be gutted in less than 48 hours. The woman in blue from the task force nodded grimly. "You need to fight fire with fire, Naomi. He has the cameras, the stage, the illusion of power. You need to take it back, publicly and decisively." Chief Ober placed his heavy hand on my shoulder. "The time for silence is over, child. Your mother's key did not survive for hiding. It survived for opening the right door." I stared at the screen, Marcus's face twisting with confidence that wasn't his to own. Then I stood. My voice was calm, but it carried the weight of something unbreakable. "Then give me the stage." Minutes later, black SUVs screeched to a halt outside the very hotel where Marcus and Darius were parading their betrayal. Task force agents moved first, clearing a path through the sea of reporters. Claire walked at my side, her folder clutched tight. Chief Ober flanked me, his presence a storm in human form. Auntie Yvette held my hand for one last squeeze before letting go. The ballroom doors burst open. The crowd gasped as I strode in, heels striking the floor like drums of war. Cameras swung, flashes exploding. Marcus's face drained of color. "Naomi," he muttered into the mic, his voice cracking. You weren't invited." I stepped up onto the stage, pulling Mama's key from my blazer pocket and holding it high for the cameras. I don't need an invitation to what already belongs to me." The crowd erupted. Darius's smile flickered. He leaned into Marcus's ear, his words low but sharp. "You said she was finished. Handle this, or I will." Marcus panicked, grabbing the mic. "Don't listen to her. She's a fraud. She's been hiding billions, stealing from governments, lying to the world. I built River Cola." I took the microphone from him, my eyes locked on the cameras, on the millions who would see this broadcast. My voice was steady, fierce, unshakable. "No, I built River Cola. I built it from cocoa farms in Lagos, from shea producers in Accra, from dock workers in Savannah who trusted me when no one else did. I built it while Marcus spent his nights in clubs, while he mocked me for saving every dollar, while he betrayed me at my own mother's funeral." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I held up the trust document Claire had placed in my hand before we entered. "This is the legal deed signed by my late mother, transferring her estate and every foundation tied to it into the River Cola Family Trust. Verified, notarized, irrefutable. This empire was never his. And today, I declare it belongs to the people who gave it life." The crowd exploded in cheers. Reporters surged forward. The cameras zoomed tight. Darius's smile vanished. His hand slipped into his jacket, but Chief Oba's men moved faster, stepping between him and the stage. For the first time, fear crossed his face. Marcus, red-faced, desperate, grabbed another mic. "She's lying. She hid a daughter from me. She's unstable. You can't—" I turned to him, the cameras catching every word as I cut him down with truth. "Yes, I have a daughter, and I hid her from you because I saw the man you really are. A man who sells his wife, his family, his soul for greed. You will never touch her. You will never touch this empire again." The roar of the crowd swallowed his protest. Reporters shouted questions, but their eyes were no longer on Marcus, they were on me. The agents surged forward, seizing Darius and his men, dragging them out in handcuffs. Marcus stumbled backward, abandoned, sweat dripping, his voice drowned out by the thunder of applause. I lifted Mama's key one final time. "This key is not just for me. It is for every hand that has ever worked, for every family that has ever dreamed. River Cola is no longer in the shadows, and no one, not betrayal, not lies, not greed, will ever take it away."
"So, what if I cheat? You should be grateful I even keep you in this house." Those were the arrogant, venomous words her husband spat when she confronted him about his endless affairs. He laughed at her tears, mocked her pain, and flaunted his mistress as if betrayal were his right. But what he never imagined was that her silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. While he boasted of his power, she was already planning her revenge. Sometimes the ones who look broken are simply waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This is the story of a wife humiliated, mocked, and betrayed, until the day she decided to fight back. And today, it is being retold by me. Hello family, welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together, we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. Emily Carter had always believed marriage was sacred. She thought love meant loyalty, respect, and partnership. She thought her husband Richard had believed the same. At least that's what he made her think on their wedding day, when he held her hand in front of hundreds of guests and swore to love her forever. But forever had come crashing down faster than she ever imagined. On the outside, Richard Carter was every woman's dream. Tall, confident, a wealthy businessman with a polished smile that could light up a room. People looked at Emily with envy, whispering, "She's lucky. She married a man who can give her the world." But behind closed doors, Richard's smile vanished. His words turned sharp, his eyes cold. He had a mistress, Vanessa Hayes, a younger woman, bold and unapologetic, and Richard didn't bother to hide it. One Friday night, Emily stood at the top of the staircase in their mansion, clutching the railing with trembling hands, as Richard strutted through the door with Vanessa on his arm. Their laughter filled the house like poison. "Richard, Emily whispered, her voice breaking. You brought her here. Vanessa smirked, tossing her silky hair over her shoulder as if she owned the place. Oh, don't look so shocked, Emily. Everyone knows about us. You're the only one pretending this is still a marriage. Richard kissed Vanessa's cheek, ignoring his wife's pain. Stop acting dramatic. Vanessa is my guest. She belongs here just as much as you do. Emily's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel even a fraction of the humiliation burning inside her. But she didn't. She swallowed it down. That night, when the party ended and Vanessa finally left, Emily confronted him. Her tears streamed down her face, her voice trembling with hurt. How could you do this to me? How can you humiliate me like this in my own home? Richard leaned back on the couch, sipping whiskey as if her pain were nothing but entertainment. Then he spat out the words that would haunt her forever. So what if I cheat? You should be grateful I even keep you in this house. Emily froze. Her hands went cold. She couldn't believe the man she once trusted could cut her so deeply. Her silence only fueled his cruelty. He smirked, as if proud of how broken she looked. Don't think for a second you can leave me, Richard sneered. You're nothing without me. You came from nothing, and you'll return to nothing. Remember that Emily turned away before he could see the rage flickering behind her tears. She had grown up poor, yes. She didn't have his wealth or status, but she had dignity. And though Richard tried to crush it, deep down, a fire was starting to burn. The next morning, Margaret Carter, Richard's mother, arrived unannounced. She sat in the grand dining room, pearls hanging from her neck, her face pulled tight with disapproval. Emily, she said sharply, as if the name itself tasted bitter. It's been 5 years and still no child. Do you know what people are saying? That you're barren. That my son is wasting his life with you. Emily's throat tightened, but she held her composure. Some things take time, Margaret. It's not something I can control. Excuses, Margaret snapped. Richard deserves better. A wife who can give him an heir. A woman from a respectable family. Not someone like you. Richard entered the room, adjusting his tie. Mother, don't waste your breath. Emily knows she's replaceable. The words sliced through her. Replaceable. Like she was a piece of furniture. Emily forced a weak smile. I may not come from wealth, but I've given this marriage everything I have. Richard chuckled cruelly. And what has that given me? Embarrassment. Margaret nodded in agreement. You should divorce her, Richard. Don't let this charity case drag you down. Emily excused herself, retreating upstairs before they could see her break. She collapsed onto the bed, covering her mouth to muffle her sobs. But her pain wasn't private for long. Her so-called friends stopped visiting, too ashamed to be seen with the wife everyone pitied. Even at church, whispers followed her. That's Richard Carter's wife. Poor thing. He doesn't even hide it anymore. Humiliation became her shadow. Wherever she went, eyes followed. Pity clung to her like a second skin. Yet through all the shame, Emily never lashed out. Not once. She stayed quiet, observant. She began to notice things Richard didn't think she saw. His late-night calls, the money he withdrew in secret, the smirk on Vanessa's face when she thought no one was watching. Emily wasn't blind. She was patient. And while Richard thought her silence was weakness, she was carefully, quietly, gathering pieces. Pieces that one day would destroy him. Emily's quietness was mistaken for weakness. Everyone thought she was too broken to fight back, too meek to stand up for herself. But silence is dangerous. It allows the mind to work, to plan, to sharpen wounds into weapons. Richard's arrogance grew bolder with each passing day. He brought Vanessa to corporate dinners, charity events, even business trips overseas. The tabloids began printing photos of them together, calling Vanessa the woman behind Richard Carter's success. And every headline was a dagger in Emily's heart. At home, Richard twisted the knife even deeper. One evening, Emily prepared his dinner. Roast chicken with herbs, his favorite. She set the table, still trying to hold on to some trace of dignity. But Richard walked in with Vanessa, arm around her waist, kissing her in plain sight. Emily's hands shook as she placed the food on the table. "Richard, please." "Not in front of me." Vanessa leaned against the counter, smirking. "Why not? You've had him long enough." "It's my turn." Richard chuckled, pouring wine into Vanessa's glass instead of Emily's. "See Emily? She's bold, fearless. That's what I love about her. You should learn a thing or two." Emily lowered her gaze, her heart pounding with humiliation. She wanted to scream, to throw the wine in his face, to drag Vanessa out of her house. But she only whispered, "You're cruel." Richard's smirk widened. "Cruel? No, I'm honest. You're lucky I let you stay here. Do you know how many men would have sent you back to that broken little house you crawled out of?" Emily bit her lip so hard it bled, holding back the storm inside her. Vanessa laughed, brushing a finger across Richard's tie. "Why don't you just get rid of her already? She's dead weight. A real man doesn't let a woman drag him down." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but instead of running to her room, she stood tall and met Vanessa's gaze. "Be careful what you wish for. A woman who steals another woman's husband will never sleep peacefully." For the first time, Vanessa faltered, her smirk slipping. Richard slammed his glass on the table. "Enough. Go upstairs if you can't handle it. This is my house, my rules." Emily turned and walked away, but her heart was not broken anymore. It was hardening. Days later, Margaret Carter paid another visit. She stormed into Emily's room without knocking, her perfume thick and suffocating. "You need to stop embarrassing this family," Margaret hissed. "Richard is a man of status. Do you think your little tears matter to him? You're nothing more than a mistake he hasn't corrected yet." Emily folded the laundry in her lap, forcing calm into her voice. "I've stood by Richard through everything, through scandals, through failures. Doesn't that count for something?" "Count?" Margaret scoffed. "A wife is supposed to give her husband children. A name to pass down. You can't even do that." Emily's chest tightened, but she refused to cry in front of her. "Maybe the problem isn't me." Margaret's eyes blazed. "How dare you suggest my son is at fault? You ungrateful little—" The door opened. Richard walked in, his expression cold as ice. "Mother, don't waste your time. She'll be out of this house soon enough." Emily's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Richard straightened his tie. "I've been patient long enough. Vanessa makes me happy, and you, well, you're nothing but a burden. The only reason I haven't divorced you yet is because the press still sees us as the perfect couple. But that won't last forever." Emily stared at him, the man she once loved, and realized he was gone. In his place stood a stranger, proud and heartless. Margaret smiled smugly, as if victory were already hers. Emily's voice was soft but steady. "If you think I'll let you destroy me, you don't know me at all." Richard laughed. "Destroy you? You've already destroyed yourself. Nobody respects you anymore. Your friends avoid you. Society pities you. You're invisible, Emily. And when I finally kick you out, no one will care." His words cut deeper than knives. But instead of collapsing, Emily stood taller. She had heard enough. That night, while Richard slept beside his phone, Emily crept into his office. She carefully opened his desk drawer and pulled out his planner. Inside were scribbles, names, dates, secret transactions. She snapped photos of every page with her phone, her hands shaking not with fear, but with purpose. She searched his email when he forgot to log out, printing copies of his conversations with Vanessa. She checked his safe when he left it unlocked, noting the offshore accounts and hidden contracts. Every detail, every secret, she stored away. Richard thought she was broken. He thought she was weak. But in her silence, Emily was gathering power. As she slipped back into bed, Richard snored beside her, blissfully unaware. He had humiliated her in front of family, friends, even strangers. He had mocked her, threatened her, treated her like trash. But Emily had learned something about betrayal. It always leaves traces. And those traces would be the rope she'd one day use to hang him with his own arrogance. She lay awake in the darkness, eyes open, whispering to herself, "You think I'm finished, Richard. But you have no idea what's coming." If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give future to children and women abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing to hitting the subscribe button and turning on your notification bell. Also, let us know in the comments where you are watching us from and how this story hit home for you. Emily thought she had seen the worst of Richard's cruelty. She was wrong. The days that followed would show her that betrayal has layers, and her husband, his mistress, and his mother would strip her soul one piece at a time. It began with the discovery she never expected. One late evening, Richard left his laptop open in the study. Emily walked in quietly, carrying a tray of coffee like the obedient wife everyone expected her to be. But her eyes caught the glow of the screen. Numbers, transactions, emails. She set the tray down carefully and leaned closer. Offshore accounts, large sums of money being transferred month after month. And then, the detail that froze her blood. An email to Vanessa. "Soon, my love. The money is almost ready. We'll disappear from this shallow city and start fresh. Just you and me." Emily's hands trembled as she scrolled. Her husband wasn't only betraying her with another woman. He was preparing to abandon her completely, robbing her of the life she had sacrificed everything to build with him. She took a deep breath, forcing herself not to scream, not to cry. She quietly emailed the files to herself, every screenshot a weapon she tucked away. Then she closed the laptop and walked out of the room with her head high. The next day, Vanessa decided to twist the knife even deeper. Emily was in the garden trimming roses when the sound of heels clicked on the stone path. She turned and saw Vanessa, bold as ever, walking into her home as if she owned it. "What are you doing here?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Vanessa smiled sweetly, the kind of smile that hid venom. "Relax. Richard invited me. He said I should make myself comfortable. After all, soon this will be our house." Emily's breath caught, but she refused to give Vanessa the satisfaction of seeing her break. "You must be very proud," she said softly, "to build your happiness on another woman's tears." Vanessa laughed, cruel and carefree. "Happiness? Oh, Emily, don't make me laugh. Richard loves me because I give him what you can't. Passion, excitement, youth. You're just furniture he's too polite to throw out." Emily's grip tightened on the shears in her hand, but she held her composure. "A woman like you will never know peace. One day you'll taste betrayal too." Vanessa stepped closer, her perfume heavy and suffocating. She whispered, almost gleeful, "Richard is filing the papers soon. You'll be out of this mansion, back to your little life. And when that happens, don't expect him to leave you a dime." Then she turned and strolled back inside, leaving Emily rooted to the ground, her heart burning but her face calm. Margaret Carter, of course, took Vanessa's side openly. That evening, the family gathered for dinner. The long dining table glittered with silver cutlery and crystal glasses, but the air was thick with tension. Margaret sat at the head of the table, eyes sharp as knives. "Vanessa," she said, raising her glass, "you bring such life into this house. You're a woman of grace, strong, beautiful, exactly what my son deserves." Emily lowered her gaze, her fork shaking in her hand. Richard smirked across the table. "Mother's right. Vanessa has energy, youth. She knows how to make me feel alive. Isn't that right, darling?" He placed a hand on Vanessa's thigh under the table, not caring that Emily saw. Vanessa giggled, her cheeks glowing with false modesty. "Richard knows what he wants. That's what I admire most about him." Margaret's eyes darted to Emily, her voice dripping with disdain. "Unlike some women who've wasted 5 years and still can't give my son a child." A wife's first duty is to bear heirs. Emily, you failed at even that. Emily felt her throat close, but she refused to cry. She forced herself to speak, her voice calm though her heart raced. Some things are beyond human control. God decides these matters, not us. Richard slammed his glass on the table, making the plates rattle. Excuses. Always excuses with you, Emily. Maybe if you weren't so plain, so lifeless, things would be different. The laughter that followed from Vanessa and Margaret pierced deeper than any knife. Emily excused herself quietly, retreating upstairs before the tears could spill. But fate had more cruelty in store that night. As Emily passed by Richard's office, she heard voices, Richard and Margaret speaking in low, conspiratorial tones. She paused, pressing her ear against the door. "She's becoming a liability," Richard muttered. "The public still sees us as a perfect couple. If I divorce her outright, it'll hurt my image." Margaret's voice was sharp, calculating. "Then ruin her. Stage a scandal. Make it look like she's the one at fault. Once her name is destroyed, no one will sympathize with her. You'll be free to marry Vanessa without backlash." Emily's blood turned to ice. Her own husband, her own mother-in-law, plotting to not just discard her, but to destroy her completely. Richard sighed. Yes, a scandal. Something humiliating. Once she's disgraced, she'll have no choice but to leave quietly, and the world will applaud me for finally moving on. Emily covered her mouth to stop a gasp. Her knees nearly buckled, but she forced herself to stay quiet. Every word was a knife, carving deeper into her soul. Margaret chuckled. "Don't worry, Richard. I'll help. I've dealt with women like her before. She'll never see it coming." Emily stepped back, her heart pounding. She hurried down the hallway into her room and locked the door. Her entire body trembled as tears spilled onto her pillow. Her husband wasn't just betraying her with another woman, he was plotting to strip her of her dignity, her name, her very identity. But in that storm of heartbreak, a strange calm settled over her. For the first time, Emily stopped crying. She sat up, wiped her face, and whispered to herself, "If they want a scandal, I'll give them one. But it will not be mine. It will be theirs." Her silence was no longer born of weakness. It was strategy. Every insult, every humiliation, every betrayal, they were sharpening her resolve like steel. That night, Richard lay in bed, his phone glowing in his hand as he texted Vanessa. Margaret slept peacefully in the guest room, and Emily sat by the window staring out at the moonlit garden, her mind racing with plans. They thought they were clever. They thought they had cornered her, broken her spirit, erased her worth. But they had underestimated her. And in that quiet darkness, Emily vowed that one day soon, Richard, Vanessa, and Margaret would choke on the very poison they had fed her. Emily Carter had spent years as the invisible wife, mocked, ignored, discarded like a shadow in her own home. Richard thought she was broken. Vanessa thought she was defeated. Margaret thought she was irrelevant. But what none of them knew was that Emily's silence was no longer pain. It was planning. And her plan began with pretending to surrender. Over the next few weeks, Emily changed. She no longer argued, no longer questioned Richard when he came home late smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. She stopped crying at Margaret's insults. She even began smiling faintly when Vanessa strutted into the mansion in her expensive dresses, pretending to mark her territory. Richard noticed. One evening, he tossed his jacket on the couch, loosened his tie and sneered. "What? No lecture tonight? No tears? You're finally learning your place?" Emily lowered her gaze, her voice soft. "I was foolish before. I know now I can't change you. I accept what you want." Richard smirked, satisfied. "Good. I was getting tired of your whining. You're finally becoming useful, silent and obedient." Vanessa laughed, leaning against the doorway with her glass of wine. "See, Richard? She's finally broken." Took her long enough, Emily smiled faintly and walked away without a word. Inside, her heart raced. not with sadness, but with victory. They believed the act. They believed she had given up. And that was the opening she needed. Richard was a man of habits. His arrogance made him predictable. Emily had watched him for months, memorizing every move. She knew exactly where he kept his personal drawer in the bathroom. She knew his toiletries, his colognes, his neatly hidden essentials for nights with Vanessa. And one night when the house was silent, Emily made her move. She slipped into the bathroom, her footsteps soundless. She opened the drawer, her hands steady despite the storm raging inside her. There it was, the small bottle Richard always kept tucked away. Emily reached into her bag and pulled out another bottle, nearly identical in shape and color. But inside was not lubricant. Inside was something far deadlier to Richard's pride: industrial strength adhesive. Her hands did not shake as she unscrewed the cap, poured out the contents of Richard's bottle, and carefully replaced it with the glue. She tightened the cap, wiped the bottle clean, and returned it exactly as it had been. As she closed the drawer, Emily caught her reflection in the mirror. For the first time, she didn't see the broken wife staring back. She saw a woman reborn, calm, calculating, dangerous. She whispered to her reflection, "You wanted a scandal, Richard. Let's see how you handle this one." It didn't take long. Richard, thinking Emily was subdued, grew careless. He flaunted Vanessa even more, bringing her to the mansion while Emily quietly slipped away to another part of the house. He believed she didn't care anymore. He believed she was too numb to notice. But Emily noticed everything. One Saturday night, Richard prepared for another private evening with Vanessa. He poured himself whiskey, joked crudely about Emily being downstairs knitting like an old woman, and led Vanessa upstairs. Emily waited in the shadows of the hallway, her breath steady, her phone in hand. She didn't need to see what came next. She only needed to wait for the screams. It happened quickly. At first there was laughter, moans, the sound of a bed creaking, but then chaos. A sudden shriek from Vanessa pierced the silence. "Richard! What the hell? Oh my God, I can't move!" Richard's voice followed, panicked and strangled. What the? We're stuck. Jesus Christ, we're glued together. Vanessa screamed again, thrashing in horror. "Get it off me! Richard, do something! It's burning! Oh my God, it's burning!" Richard cursed loudly, his arrogance collapsing into sheer terror. "Don't move! Don't! Ah! Damn it! We can't separate! Someone help! Help!" Emily stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening as their screams filled the house. For the first time in years she smiled, a true smile, sharp and satisfied. The neighbors heard the chaos. They called 911. Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of the Carter mansion. Sirens wailed, cameras flashed as firefighters, paramedics and police rushed inside. The scene was pure humiliation. Richard Carter, the polished businessman, the man who prided himself on charm and power, was carried out of his own home half-naked, fused to his mistress. Vanessa, her makeup smeared with tears, sobbed hysterically, begging to be freed. The firefighters struggled, muttering under their breath as they carefully tried to separate the two with medical solvents. The paramedics shook their heads, whispering, "Never seen anything like this." And the neighbors? They stood outside, recording everything on their phones. The scandal spread instantly. Within hours, photos and videos were all over social media. Billionaire Richard Carter and mistress glued together in bizarre accident. The hashtags trended, the gossip spread like wildfire. Emily watched from the window as Richard was loaded into the ambulance, Vanessa clinging to him in shame. Paparazzi swarmed, flashes blinding them, questions flying. "Richard, is it true? Vanessa, how did this happen? Emily, are you still his wife?" But Emily said nothing. She simply closed the curtains, her phone buzzing in her hand, because the humiliation wasn't complete yet. Emily had one final card to play. She opened her laptop and logged into a hidden email account. Attached were dozens of photos she had collected over months. Richard kissing Vanessa in hotels, sneaking out of meetings, funneling money into offshore accounts. She sent them to every major tabloid, every gossip blogger, every journalist who had ever written about Richard's perfect marriage. Then she sat back, calm and composed, as the world devoured the scandal. By morning, headlines screamed across every platform. Richard Carter's double life exposed. Affair ends in disaster. Firefighters rescue businessman and mistress. Wife betrayed, husband humiliated. The empire Richard had built on charm and deception crumbled overnight. His investors pulled out. His clients distanced themselves. His carefully crafted image was shattered beyond repair. And Emily? She remained silent, her face serene. When the reporters came knocking, she gave no interviews. She released no statements. She let the world draw its own conclusions. And every conclusion painted her as the tragic, wronged wife. Silent, dignified, betrayed. No one suspected that behind that silence was the hand that had orchestrated it all. The lesson was clear. Arrogance, betrayal, and cruelty can strip a man of everything. But patience, intelligence, and quiet strength can turn even the most broken woman into the most dangerous opponent. Emily Carter had been humiliated, mocked, and betrayed, but she had also endured, planned, and risen. And now, as she stood in her bakery surrounded by warmth and laughter, she knew one thing with certainty. She had won.